Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with kind of a double feature for you. As you can see, I've got Bougainville, the Forgotten Campaign, laid out for you. But first, I want to show you the War Diary magazine that I actually just got in, because this is one of the games that you can actually select if you get a subscription to War Diary. So here's the magazine. This is the latest issue, number 16, that actually just came in. You see it's got War Diary up here, and an easy way to tell that Bougainville is one of the ones is you see it right down here in the bottom, War Diary, a wargaming journal for Bougainville, and this is by LNL Publishing. So if you guys remember, if you have seen my previous one, if you get a subscription to this one, you don't, they don't actually like pack a game in the magazine like some gaming companies do. Some magazine companies do. They let you pick one from the games on demand from LNL Publishing, which is kind of cool. You actually get to choose what you want to get versus just, luck of the draw, whatever they put in there. I know there was a thing about it. I can't remember where it is in this magazine. But real quick, just to show you what's in the newest issue, because I like these magazines. They have an interesting, wide variety of topics that they cover. And it's not all about just one gaming company. They let them put in anything about anything, any time period, any game company. It doesn't matter. Whatever the person wants to cover is what they're covering. So I like that. It is a nice wide variety. One thing definitely did catch my attention on here. So in this one, we got these main articles listed down here. Trial of Error, Ludendorff, and the Kaiserschlacht, 1918 by Paul Combin. This is the essayist's look at Germany's last big offensive, World War I. Sounds cool. World War I's not a big area of interest for me, but I do like it much more than I do the Civil War. Kernstown by John Burritt. A look at two different game systems for gaming this critical American Revolutionary War battle. The Devils to Pay, two Confederate variants, which is actually kind of interesting. They have variants for games in here. I think there's another house rules something. Is it this one? The Konsberg 1945. Yeah, here it is. Konzi House Rules by Claire Konzelman. The newest installment of author's famous house rules, this time for Revolution Games Eastern Fronts game. Now, this next one is the big one that really caught my attention. Blitzkrieg First Impressions by Robert Smith. A first look at Diffraction Entertainment's Western Front monster game. And you guys know I like monster games. I can't get them to the table as much as I would like to because, good God, they take so much time and effort and space and everything. But they're just so cool when they're laid out on the table. And there's an interview after that, War Diary interview, John Bannerman by Roy Matheson, an interview with the head of Diffraction Entertainment. So I'm guessing a lot of it would have to do with Blitzkrieg. Pass in Review, Capsule Games, and book reviews by Andy Nunez, Robert Hatcher, and Hans Korting. So let's take a look real quick at page 40, because that was the big one that definitely caught my attention. One more page here. Yeah, Blitzkrieg First Impressions. Nice big article talking about how much larger this version of the game is. This is essentially the second edition of it. I think it's, where is it? Talking about it right about here. It says it includes 18 maps, up from the 17 maps before, and almost 2,000, over 2,000 more counters. 6,720 counters in this game. That thing's going to be a beast. There are some pictures, and I kind of show you guys there, of the game laid out, and it just looks massive. There's another one they took down over here. Game in action, and the advertisement for it here at the end. This one evidently is fairly expensive. 300 pounds, which was that like $350 or so, something like that. So this was one I wouldn't mind getting on my table at some point, but it's definitely going to be a while with a new baby on the way. I am not going to be able to talk the wife into any $300 games anytime soon. So that one's coming in the future, maybe. But they do have the interview right after it with John Bannerman. That is really cool. that they put that in there. So definitely check out War Diary if you guys haven't. It is a cool magazine. They cover lots of different topics. Like I said, I've enjoyed it thus far, so I do recommend the magazine. Like, you have to be a history buff. If you're into whatever period, they'll have something for you in there. You know, Civil War, Revolutionary War, World War I, World War II. I can't remember right off the top of my head if I've seen any modern stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised that they would cover it. I mean, it would make sense. I mean, it's wargaming. So definitely check it out. And like I said, you can go to Games on Demand, or yeah, it's Games on Demand, LNL Publishing, to check out the games that you can get with your subscription. Now, with Bougainville here, I'm not going to play through a match. It's not really that type of a game. This one is not conducive really for solitaire play. As you can see here, the Japanese counters are hidden. So there is a fair amount of hidden information in this game. Now, I was thinking about it, of a workaround for this that I think that could work. Let me go ahead and address that real quick since I'm talking about it, and then we'll get into the game. But just to show you, in the back is where they're showing the setup, all right? The order of battle. So scenario 1, we've got our Japanese units, our American units on this page. So some of the Japanese units are dummies. Some of them are real units. Some of them are Army units. Some of them are Navy units. But essentially, you've got a few dummies and then regular ones. These have to be in specific hexes, and these have to be in specific hexes. The fortifications are kind of an issue. That's something else that would have to be kind of house ruled for solitaire play. But these can go in any hex, and these can go in any hex in Bougainville. So you have this little group here that's only going to be in very specific hexes, and this group here that can be in any hex. Well, that's what I've got set up on the board for you, and I was kind of thinking that if you did want to play it solitaire, the ones that could be in any hex, you could take and, you know, easily shuffle those counters and then figure out some way to randomize it, whether it's a dice roll or something like that. You know, the maps basically folded in half here. You could roll for each one. Are they going to be northern or southern? And then roll, are they going to be, you know, on a base, or are they going to be on rough jungle terrain or jungle plain? You know, what type of terrain they're going to be on, just to try to give yourself some randomization. And this is, again, this is just me spitballing on how you could potentially play it solitaire. So I do think you could, if you really, 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 really wanted to. But definitely the game's worth trying. The game's interesting. It's got a lot of stuff under the hood. But I do think that they have other games that would play solitaire much easier in the Games on Demand than having to house roll all this stuff. But I did want to put it in there that it is possible, I believe. I haven't tried it, but I do believe you could work it out. You would definitely have to have the AI playing the hidden units, and you would be limited to the allied faction. All right, so what comes with the game? It is one of the folio type games that you're going to have just a little envelope. Here's the back sheet that comes with it. Obviously, the cover of the rulebook takes cover is the cover of the bag. Other than that, you're going to have 2 player aids, 1 for each player. You will have almost a full sheet of counters. And something really cool about this is the standard Lock and Load Publishing counters. All right, so it's not like it's a cheaper version of their counters for a cheaper game. These are their full, pre-rounded, nice and thick. And I punched one out. Let's get it in there. What you guys see in camera. Nice, thick counters that you have come to expect from Lock and Load Publishing. The map is paper, but it's the cardstock type paper. Same stuff that the player aids are made of, so perfectly serviceable. But yeah, you get the map, the 2 player aids, the rule book, and the, I don't want to say whole sheet of counters because it's not a full up and down sheet. It's missing like a couple of rolls, but almost a full sheet of counters for the game. So what's the purpose? Well, Short version in history, in Bougainville, they were trying to get to Rabaul. They had a place for their heavy bombers that could launch and go hit Rabaul, but they needed a airstrip closer to launch medium and smaller bombers and fighter escorts, and they decided to do that from Bougainville. And the thing is they didn't really have to take out all of Bougainville. They just needed to get an airstrip set up that they could launch from and hold back the Japanese attackers that were left on the island, because they weren't exactly in the best shape. They weren't very well supplied with food and ammunition and all that. So the Japanese were still hardcore. I mean, they were doing their bonsai attacks and everything, which are in the game, which is cool. So the general gist of the operation was that the Marines were going to come in and land, take over an area. The Army would come in, hold it, and launch the missions they need to launch to go after Rabaul. But also Australian forces, which are in this game as well, I do believe those are these counters, get involved, and they're going to come in and help mop up the Japanese that were left on the island after the airstrip had been set up. So you got one side that wants to basically wipe out all the Japanese that are on the map, and you have the Japanese, they automatically win if they can take out the beachhead, which has its airstrip there on the other side. Let you guys see that. That's really cool because it does have a defense factor that can come into it. You got 12 turns, depending on the scenario. You see down here at the bottom, I did stack some of the reinforcements because that's the big thing that you're going to have. So just to show you guys, we would start off with the Americans coming in, the Marines, because the Marines kick ass and take names. It's what they do. And they would pick an area they're going to land, right? So they would have this, and the counters are very easy to understand. Your standard NATO symbols, and then you have the attack value and movement value there on the counter. So this one would have an attack value of 3, and that's attack and defense, right? So whatever, that's your combat number, and then the right number is your movement allowance, which you're going to dictate off of here from your terrain features. It'll tell you how much the movement point cost is going to be for whatever different type of terrain that you're moving from. And then here is your combat results table. You see it's an odds-based combat result. So whatever it is, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. And you are going to round down when you're doing your numbers. And here are your combat results. Pretty standard stuff if you played any type of military board game before. Stuff like attacker eliminated, attacker retreats, attacker loses step, up to nothing happens, to defender retreats, defender lose steps, defender eliminated. That type of results is what you're going to have on your combat results table. So the Marines would come in, they would attack, they would pick a spot on the island that they want to try to gain control of. They'll kill off whatever units are there. They'll gain control of that area. And then after the beachhead has been set up and it's located there, the next turn, then it gets to flip over to where it's activated. And that's the cool part, because that's where you start getting air reinforcements, which you can either use once per round as a combat modifier. So you're using your air power to fight the Japanese units that are on the island, or you could use it on its other side, which is interdiction, and it's going after the farms and basically trying to cut off the Japanese supplies that are here. Because the Allied forces basically just get supplies. They've got to trace a line of communication to their beachhead. You know, the usual thing, it can be any number of length, can't go through an enemy zone of control, that type stuff. And they have to be able to trace it to the beachhead, and they will get supplies, reinforcements, all that other good stuff. The Japanese operate over here, and they have a counter that keeps track of their supplies. They have to spend supplies to do things like reinforce their troops, to lay down fortifications, anything that they're really trying to do, they got to spend supply points. And I think it's around turn 7 is when the Japanese stop getting supplies, because they're not being reinforced anymore, and they're basically just hanging on, and they don't get to reinforce their guys, and the They're just hanging on by the skin of their teeth at that point in the game. All right, and just to grab out a few counters just to show you guys kind of what it might look like. Few rounds into the game, you've moved forward, you've got some fortifications put down, which is awesome, but you've got to be thinking about where you put those fortifications. You really want to kind of, if you're the ally player, surround your beachhead with them, because like I said, later on in the game, that beachhead gets to take its combat value of 5 and kind of push it out into any adjacent fortifications. I think it's up to 2 hexes. It might only be 1, but I think it's up to 2 hexes away from it, and spread that firepower out or just put it to 1. So it's kind of like a free combat value that it gets to apply in certain areas. But you'll push out, you'll start revealing some of these Japanese units as you attack them, but you can find out that, hey, it's a dummy unit and that's not actual anything there. So you move it on. And the Japanese player, they're going to be pushing in and trying to take this beachhead out, but they have the ability, just like the Marines do, to do an amphibious landing. Now, the Marines are the only ones in this game that can do an amphibious assault. They're the ones that can land on an enemy-occupied sea hex and actually attack the unit. The army units aren't able to do that because they're not as good as Marines, because there aren't really Marines yet. Which, one thing I really did get a kick out of on this is that there are morale checks in this game, and the Marines get a higher morale value, which I did kind of like, as I guess Lock and Load is listening to me. So yeah, morale, the Japanese equals the highest combat value. The Marines is 1 to 5, and 6 is a fail. So 1 through 5, the Marines pass, 6 fails. The Army and the Australians, 1 to 4 passes, and 5 to 6 fails. So, I mean, for the Marines, it should be 1 to 6 passes, because, you know, we just never quit. But that's all right. You know, for a little gamesmanship, we'll give them the 6 as the fail. All right, a couple things I want to point out about this game that are a little bit different, that, you know, kind of make it stand out, is one, a real easy thing is that the units that have multiple steps, you'll just flip them over to designate, you know, when they take a step loss. The Japanese units obviously can't do that because they've got their dummy sides on the back to hide it from your opponent. There are counters to signify for the Japanese if they've got a step loss. So halves their strength, and you would just place that on your Japanese units to signify. Now, something else that's in this game is fatigue. You're going to get fatigued when you attack or combat results. There are many different things that can cause fatigue in this game, and they obviously are going to affect the level, the combat value of your unit, so it can wear them down. Now, there's 3 levels of fatigue. So you've got not fatigued at all, so there'll be no counter. Then you have fatigued, and then on the back side of that is going to be exhausted. If you take a fatigue step after exhausted, you actually lose steps at that point. So your units can get fatigued from attacking or their combat results, like I said. And it's just like supplies and reinforcement. When your first movement is started, because that's actually kind of neat too. There's multiple movement phases in this. You've got a movement phase, combat phase, and then another minor movement phase where there's certain restrictions, like it only can be along roads and things like that. But a little bit of extra movement so you can kind of try to outwit your opponent. But in that first movement phase, the allies get to automatically remove fatigue 1 step from their units if they have a line of communication back to the beachhead. Like I said, it can be any length, however you got to trace it around, obviously not out into the middle of the ocean, around the island, but as long as they can trace it back to this beachhead, not through enemies or enemy zones of control, then they get to have that. The Japanese don't have that luxury, though. The Japanese really are fighting at a disadvantage in this one, because they have to pay their supply points that they're going to get each round to take away fatigue from their units. So whereas the American units get to kind of hit indiscriminately because they know they've got supplies, you know, unlimited supplies basically, and get to keep pushing and pushing. The Japanese really have to make the most of their attacks when they're trying to do everything, because they only have so much. Their supplies have to be used for multiple things, between their own fortifications that they're going to be putting onto the ground, resupplying their units, removing their fatigue. It really is an asymmetrical fight that's going on here, which I like when you're doing a 2-player game like this, especially in a heads-up game, because a symmetrical fight, it's like playing chess. And I know that plenty of people like chess. I'm not a big chess guy. Let's knock it down. Checkers, right? Checkers, everyone's got the same crap. Doesn't matter. There's not as much strategy. But if you've got different forces on each side, you've got different rules for each side, it just kind of changes things up. You know, one side's on the back foot and they're trying to figure it out. They've got a large control over the island, but they've got a far lower amount of supplies and units, really strong combat capable units to fight off the enemy. So they have to be smart. They have to fight guerrilla style. The other one only starts off with a very small bit of control and they have to kind of push out like a virus and take the whole thing. So they'd only have a little bit of control of the island, but they have a whole lot of forces behind that spearhead that's pushing in. Oh, and just in case I didn't mention it, there are tanks in the game as well, which is awesome. And things like artillery, which can do offensive and defensive bombardment to support your troops. Definitely awesome stuff. So for me, and I know I haven't covered near everything. Like I said, this was just a quick overview of Bougainville here. But I think as a heads up, if you want a heads up game, especially an asymmetrical heads up game, this one could potentially be a lot of fun because there are so many moving parts going on here. You have to worry about what's going on, like with your little bit of a beachhead here with the American forces. You're trying to gain your toehold in there. So if the Japanese can quickly gather their forces in and push them off, then, you know, the Americans can lose very quickly. But once the Americans get their toehold in and get their fortifications set down, so they start getting those combat modifiers in their favor, you know, you don't want to let them get their beachhead as the Japanese, because then you're on your back foot. Then you're fighting guerrilla style the rest of the time, just trying to keep them from taking the island. Now, I did mention that there are a couple of sudden death things. So if all the Japanese are wiped out, or if the Japanese take out the American beachhead, either side that does that wins. Short of that, when you hit round 12, you're going to add up your victory points that you get throughout the game. And there's multiple different ways to gain victory points. And it's Japanese bombarding the airfield, counterattack versus the army and the Marines. The Marines attacked on turn 1. They get bonus points. Coordinated attack versus the army. So you'll see there's multiple different ways that you're going to get your victory points. And there are the victory point trackers, which you definitely want to keep track of as you're going along with the game. So yeah, I like the game. I think it's neat. I think it's definitely more suited for absolute heads up play. Because like I said at the beginning, I think you could make it work for solitaire play, but the amount of effort that you got to put in to make it work is a little bit much. And they have so many good options for solitaire play at Lock and Load anyway, that there are other options that you could pick that you wouldn't have to put in the effort. So unless you're specifically looking for a game about Bougainville and this whole fight as a solitaire player, specifically Satan solitaire player, then this is one you could pass on. If you got someone you can play with on a regular basis, though, yeah, absolutely check it out. I really like the fact that they've got a lot of gameplay in a small package. The top-notch quality on the components has to be a paper map, since it's obviously the cheaper end of the games, you know, the folio type games. But the fact that the counters are so nice, the pre-rounded, nice printed, nice and thick counters that you do expect from Lock and Load. I like the fact that they're including these in the game instead of cheaping out with a lower quality one. You can still have a good feeling game, good looking game on the table without having to break the bank or not having to spend anything if you choose it for your War Diary game. All right, but that's going to be it for this one. You guys let me know what you think, and definitely let me know if you want to have me still covering more of these smaller games, the games on demand, more of the War Diary stuff, kind of showing you guys what's coming out from that field of wargaming. All right, but that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I will see you in the next one.